During the 1960 election campaign, he read The King Must Die by Mary Renaud about the martyrdom of such folk heroes as Arthur in Britain and Roland in France. Given Kennedy's middle-brow fondness for show tunes, it was only natural that in May 1962, Jackie invited Frederick Loewe to a small dinner at the White House. At the president's request, the composer played the score of Camelot on the piano. Still, many of Kennedy's friends, especially the intellectuals, have tried to dismiss or downplay the Camelot image as inapt and mawkish, suggesting that it would have made the cool and brainy JFK wince. Harvard economist John Kenneth Galbraith said Jackie regretted the Camelot association as overdone. Historian Arthur Schlesinger, Jr. called it myth turned into a cliché. It had no application during President Kennedy's life. He would have been derisive about it. Jackie's conversation with Teddy White, he said, was her most mischievous interview. The image was mischievous and legendary. Camelot itself was not noted for marital constancy, and it ended in blood and death. For those very reasons, Jackie Kennedy might well have wished to retract her words. Although the Arthurian legend evoked battlefield bravery, King Arthur and his knights fighting to regain his kingdom, and idealism, the quest for the Holy Grail of perfection by the knights, it also, as Schlesinger pointed out, featured treachery, Arthur's nephew Mordred seizing his kingdom and taking the queen captive, and adultery, the love affair of Guinevere and Arthur's valiant knight, Sir Lancelot. But Jackie Kennedy never backed away from Camelot. What she wanted to convey was the magic of her husband's presidency, an interlude marked by grand intentions, soaring rhetoric, and high style. At the end of January 1964, in a letter to former British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan, she conceded that Camelot was overly sentimental, but maintained it was right, because those 1,036 days had been a brief, shining moment that would not be repeated. 2 years after the assassination, in 1,000 Days, John F. Kennedy in the White House, the book that set the template for the Kennedy years, Schlesinger himself described the period's life-affirming, life-enhancing zest, the brilliance, the wit, the cool commitment, the steady purpose. It was a view that remained undimmed for him and for many others, despite 40 years of tawdry revelations about JFK's reckless womanizing and his administration's decision to enlist the mob to assassinate Fidel Castro. The picture of the Kennedy White House has been blurred by this competition between the Camelot mythology and the powerful impulse to tear it down. Thousands of books, articles, and television documentaries have created a funhouse mirror in which reflections of the Kennedys jump cut from clarity to distortion. Hopes had been so high, the romance so strong, and the tragedy so great that the everyday reality of the Kennedy White House seemed insufficiently dramatic. Because Jack and Jackie were such magnetic stars, their supporting players and their complex interactions with the Kennedys were often overlooked or given short shrift. But with the passage of time, emotions have softened, and members of the Kennedy circle, including many who have never spoken publicly before, discussed their years in the limelight with detachment and a sense of perspective. Fresh insights were also drawn from previously unavailable letters and personal papers. The story that emerges, recounted in this book, is more compelling than the Kennedy mythologies. It is a story of people selected by history, some with extraordinary talents, others blessed with the gift of loyalty, struggling to guide the United States through perilous times, even as they wrestled with their own frailties and the temptations of power. From the remove of 4 decades, the Kennedy White House emerges not as a model of enlightened government, nor as a series of dark conspiracies, but rather as a deeply human place. The Kennedys may have been Democrats, full of compassion for the poor and dispossessed, but the image of Jack and Jackie as king and queen surrounded by their court had occurred to many people familiar with the administration. The British political philosopher and formidable Oxford don, Isaiah Berlin, a guest at several private White House dinners, saw the Kennedys as Bonapartist, finding parallels in Napoleon's brothers who, like Robert F. Kennedy as Attorney General and Edward M. Kennedy as U.S. Senator, held responsible positions in the government. Berlin found further similarities in the aides who served their leader. Devoted, dedicated marshals who liked nothing better than to have their ears tweaked. Kennedy's men with shining eyes, Berlin observed, had a great deal of energy and ambition, and were marching forward in some very exciting and romantical fashion. David Ormsby Gore, the British ambassador during the Kennedy administration, and one of the president's most intimate friends and advisers, likened the administration to a Tudor court. Richard Neustadt, then a professor of government at Columbia University, mused that the Kennedy court life, a sinecurial arrangement last seen in the White House of Theodore Roosevelt, had the equivalent of apartments at Versailles and latchkeys for the weekends. The columnist Stuart Alsop complained after 1 year of the Kennedy administration, "The place is lousy with courtiers and ladies-in-waiting, actual or would-be." As with court life in earlier centuries, the Kennedy entourage made a stately progress, from the White House to expensive homes in the Virginia Hunt country to Palm Beach, Hyannisport, and Newport, all playgrounds for the rich and privileged. "Jackie wanted to do Versailles in America," said Oleg Cassini, her official dress designer and self-described de facto courtier close to the king and queen. "She said this many times," Cassini added. She had realized some very smart women encouraged a court throughout history. In particular, Jackie admired Madame de Maintenon, who presided over a legendary salon before marrying Louis XIV, and Madame de Recamier, the early 19th century hostess famous for the wit and intelligence of her gatherings. Jackie organized her life in the White House according to what interested her, handing off many of the ritual obligations to others and delegating the paperwork to subordinates. "My life here, which I dreaded and which at first overwhelmed me, is now under control and the happiest time I have ever known, not for the position, but for the closeness of one's family," Jackie wrote to her friend William Walton in mid-1962. "The last thing I expected to find in the White House." On any given day, President Kennedy would be managing what veteran Democratic advisor Clark Clifford called the cockiest crowd I'd ever seen in the White House. A group of West Wing aides that National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy likened to the Harlem Globetrotters, passing forward, behind, sideways, and underneath. At another moment, JFK might be swimming in the White House pool, heated to 90 degrees for his ailing back, with his trusted factotum, Dave Powers, and a couple of fetching West Wing secretaries, or having a tete-a-tete lunch, grilled cheese, cold beef, consommé, with Jackie, or clapping his hands 3 times to welcome his 3-year-old daughter, Carolyn, into the Oval Office. Jackie, meanwhile, might be at the long table in the treaty room on the 2nd floor of the White House, smoking her L&M filtered cigarettes and scribbling memos on foolscap, or composing a letter to French Culture Minister André Malraux, one of her mentors. Perhaps she would be bouncing on the canvas trampoline on the South Lawn to relieve stress, or curled up with Marcus Cecchi's The Cardinal de Bernis, a biography, or ducking into the White House school in the 3rd-floor solarium, where the squeals of children competed with the yelps of 5 dogs and the chirps of 2 parakeets, part of a menagerie that brought to mind Teddy Roosevelt's days in the executive mansion. In the evening, Jack and Jackie would typically host a dinner for 8, a collection of close friends with an imported New York artist or writer as a new face, as Italian songs played softly on the Victrola. The conversation, invariably informal and candid, might touch on the Queen of Greece, nothing but a busybody, seeming to save the world but basically building herself up, according to Jackie, the origin of the French ambassador's pinstriped shirt, Pierre Cardin, not Jermyn Street in London, the character of Richard Nixon,